concept art plays a vital role in the creative industries like gaming, film, and animation. It brings written ideas to life through digital art techniques. But there's far more to it than simply creating a beautiful image. Every piece requires intentional decisions and deliberate choices to effectively communicate meaning and emotion. At Athena Productions, one of our guiding principles has always been the power of storytelling through design. We firmly believe that good design is good storytelling. Stories are at the heart of what we create. They have the power to convey information to the viewer or the player. For instance, imagine walking through a forest. Are the trees twisted and dead, their bare branches reaching out like claws? Or are they vibrant and alive with sunlight pouring through a canopy of green leaves? Even without much of a description, we instinctively know how each version feels. The dead forest feels unfriendly, hostile, dangerous, while the vibrant one feels inviting and safe. But how do we translate this story through art alone? This is the challenge of storytelling in concept art, creating designs that spark feelings, reveal layers of a story, and immerse viewers or players in the world that is being crafted. Just a quick heads up before we get into the video, if you're finding this content helpful or inspiring, remember to subscribe and leave us a comment. It really helps us know what kind of stuff you want to see more of from our team at Athena Productions. My name is Ellie Cooper and I'm the Creative Director at Athena Productions, and today I'll be walking you through how we bring storytelling into our concept art using our project Merchant Disaster as an example. Let's get started. Before we even put pen to tablet, the first thing we consider is, what story are we trying to tell? Is this a peaceful, idyllic scene or something darker, tense and dangerous? Storytelling is deeply embedded in design and it informs every decision a concept artist makes. Every choice, whether it's shape language, colour palette or lighting, works together to reinforce the intended narrative. If something is meant to feel threatening, we use sharp, aggressive forms and details. If it's meant to feel warm and welcoming, we soften the shapes, adjust the colours and shift the lighting accordingly. For our Merchant Disaster concept, we begin with a simple story prompt. A merchant convoy has been attacked, raided and left in ruins. It's immediately clear that something terrible has happened here. And from there, we just begin to collect references. These can include composition, inspiration, lighting, colour scheme, mood boards and smaller details like crows or perhaps historical references for merchant goods and perhaps even armour for foot soldiers. It's also helpful to list storytelling elements very early on. In this case, we want to lean into the brutality of the scene. That could mean adding bodies scattered across the environment, blood, gore, discarded merchant items, and details like crows beginning to gather. It's never one thing that tells the story. It's the combination of countless small decisions that the concept artist makes that build the bigger picture. We establish the mood early as it significantly influences the tone of the piece. Here we lean into the cold colours, overcast lighting and creeping fog to immediately set an ominous atmosphere. These simple choices really quickly tell the viewer that this place isn't safe, something's happened here, it's dangerous. We also begin to explore camera angles before settling on one that's around eye level. We want the viewer to see the scene from the perspective of the rider who is discovering the devastation. Our main focal point from the very beginning is the caravan. It must look destroyed, broken, twisted, almost maybe even lying on its side, wheels missing. If it just were standing perfectly untouched in the centre of a scene, a key narrative moment would be lost and it would feel odd and out of place with some of our planned details that we want to bring in. But small details like how the wagon is positioned can strengthen the story dramatically, and they don't really take much time to implement either. So make sure that even your focal point, you've considered how that's going to help your story. Next, we move on to other larger details. Remember, always work from big to small. We begin populating the scene with characters. If the brief stated that the guards were missing, we might use elements like drag marks or scattered gear and an absence of the person who had that before. But here we want to show the aftermath of a battle, with the merchant guards still lying where they fell. We start adding storytelling elements to the caravan as well. Using Simply Cloth plugin, we drape fabric over the wagon, which later becomes a canvas for the merchant's coat of arms. Another great reason to start brainstorming early on about the kinds of motifs and elements you might want to include and how you can incorporate it into the image. We also layer in bloodstains, mud and dirt while pushing the look and feel of the ground in Blender, giving a wet, slightly reflective surface that adds extra realism and mood. We also consider, what was this caravan carrying? Rather than choosing one specific item such as fruit or something like that, we want to add in a variety of props. So crates, barrels, cages, pouches, to show it was transporting a number of goods. Strapping items to the roof and sides can also add extra detail and visual interest to the caravan, as well as just breaking up the general shape of it. With the core of our scene established, we begin developing the surrounding elements. We layer in trees, rocks, branches and grass to bring the muddy forest to life. These textural elements break up the scene, adding realism and depth. Without adding in those environmental details, you risk the ground just feeling flat or unconvincing and not very interesting. We also use a high dynamic range image, but it's most commonly known as a HDRI, to simulate realistic lighting. In this case, an overcast sky gives us a soft, moody lighting with subtle shadows, perfect for hinting at hidden dangers or details. Combined with volumetric fog, the result is a heavy, oppressive atmosphere that can really help us to sell the tension of this scene. Now we start adding deeper storytelling details. Details like exaggerated gore, repeated heraldic symbols, and consistent guard armor visually connecting the fallen characters to the caravan itself. It's important that these don't just feel like random victims that happen to stumble upon this caravan. We want to make sure that people get the idea that they were either protecting the caravan or were just, accompanying the caravan as it journeyed. We also begin hinting at what the attacker was or wasn't. For example, the scattered gold coins raises the question of, why didn't the attacker take those coins? And deep gashes in the wagon's sides that seem inhuman and more beastly. So what could have caused those? We also have faint footprints in the mud that aren't booted or similar to human prints. And these visual cues begin to reinforce that it was a creature rather than typical bandits. And that's where you need to be thinking about how your story can read to someone. If you have different details, could that skew somebody's idea of whether it is a human or a creature? And as we approach the end of the image, we are focused on micro details that can push the story further. A torn dress maybe that is half pulled from the wreckage, a shattered tree, implying someone was thrown against it with inhuman force, subtle splinters and blood around the scene. Each detail adds to the scene's emotional and narrative weight. Even the animals help to tell the story. We've got the horses that were pulling the cart lying on the ground and circling crows that are amplifying the sense of loss and brutality of the scene. They're already present. And it can also lead to a great gameplay mechanic, how players could discover this scene. Are there birds circling in the air that hint to a player that something is around that area? And these weren't just victims of a normal robbery. That's very important that we establish that. They were torn apart by something monstrous. Even a lone guard is slumped at the base of a tree, partially obscured, broken armor glinting, blood pooling beneath him. It tells its own story of desperation and violence as these people tried to get away from whatever this creature is. Every single element throughout our whole image, big or small, should support the narrative. By the end, we have a concept art piece that is filled with narrative and tension. Every detail has been carefully and meticulously designed and crafted to serve the story. Let's go through some of those elements as we finish. So throughout the image, we have multiple different storytelling elements that make up this big whole. So for example, we have these crows that are kind of sitting and waiting here. And these are a great symbol for, death and bad things happening and such. So we incorporated those in. And then we have, for example, with this, our main focal point being the caravan, we've made sure that it is off on an angle. And, we have things like the broken wheels here, and some of the smashed floorboards here, or scratches through it as well. Especially, that this is scratched through the insignia as well. It's an interesting kind of detail. And we can sense that, this is a creature rather than a human. Same with kind of having footprints such as here that are more creature rather than human. And of course, throughout the scene, we have loads of different details of kind of the people that are lying, fallen, including, the horses, and this also adds to the story, like we were saying, that this creature didn't care, it didn't care whether they were human, animal, whatever. It wanted to get to that caravan, and it did. And we also have elements such as, a smashed, a splintered tree, which also adds to the idea that, a very brutal fight, perhaps somebody got thrown against it or something like that. And these sharp edges have now kind of come off the tree. And as well, we also have like these insignias, and just kind of the same design language throughout on these insignias, the same yellow, blue, things like that. And we've kind of incorporated it into various elements. And also onto, you can kind of see it here as well. We have the insignia on some of the guards' uniform. We also had as well the goods scattered around the area. So we have, some of the gold that's here. We have multiple gold coins. We have some like clothing that's been half pulled out of the caravan, and multiple other bits and pieces around the area. And this is just to, again, serve the story that this creature had no real interest, perhaps, or perhaps not the cognitive ability to collect all of the coins. It hit this caravan for an unknown reason, whether it was because, yes, there was gold, but it wasn't as though it was multiple bandits who were collecting all of the gold as they went. And then, of course, we have our rider that is discovering the scene. And we want to make sure that we kind of have that narrative of somebody discovering our rider is coming up to this devastation and just checking it out. And as well, we also have a signpost that kind of hints at where this place was traveling. It was on a well-used road, the road kind of coming in through here. And it was traveling through the road. Perhaps it was taking a break. They were all standing by the side of the road, and then whatever attacked them. But it certainly was brave enough to attack them on the main road. And all of these elements, as people look around this image, around this scene, they start to discover more storytelling elements. And that's the joy of it, that people just, as they view it, they see more and more and more. And that's kind of what makes up the, all these little elements, they make up one big story. So how can you strengthen storytelling in your own concept art? Here are some quick tips. Always start with a backstory. Even a simple one-line story can spark powerful ideas. Make a list of visual elements. Using your backstory, you can make a list of what can help to reinforce the story, whether that's lighting, shapes, or detail. Research and observe. Design is all about mixing the familiar with the unfamiliar. So make sure you gather references. Real-world knowledge makes your concept art more believable. Experiment and iterate. Don't settle for your first idea. It's usually not your best. You can do quick black and white sketches to explore options and decide from there. Get feedback. Fresh ideas can help to suggest cool details or ideas that can improve your concept art. At the end of the day, concept art isn't just about creating something beautiful. It's about making people feel something. When storytelling drives your designs, your art is felt and understood by the audience. If this helped you or gave you some fresh perspective, be sure to subscribe and leave us a comment, as it helps us out an awful lot. Until next time.